welcome back to the Mixing Music Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Kei, and with me, as always, is my lovely co-host, Lil Lu.
If you don't have a cherry in your mouth when you do that, it just doesn't hit the same.
That was yes. Welcome to the Mixing Music Podcast, where we make JoJo's Bizarre Adventure references. Welcome back to the Mixing Music Podcast. I'm really excited for this episode in general. This is an episode that we do quite often. Actually, not as often as some people would like, but we're going to do another classic plugin update episode. Currently, we do not have any sponsors. Our last sponsor was from Baby Audio, and their link is still active if you go to mixingmusicpodcast.com/babyaudio. I think the code was MMPod. I think that's what the code was. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And then, so let's talk about some of the plugins that we've been using. I mean, obviously, we haven't changed a ton, but there's been new ones that we've been liking, things that we've been discovering from across the board. And I think right now, since there are no sponsors, then we can kind of be unbiased and talk about the tools that we are currently that are currently are going through the rotation. I think there's I say this every single time, but there is a preface that I want to make is that we're all about empowering the listener to make, to build their career and to make better creative decisions. And I don't think that having more plugins will necessarily make you a better mixer or anything like that, or that you're necessarily missing out if you don't use these things. But I also think that you get more options, more flavors, and personal enjoyment from using all sorts of different plugins. So these are some of the ones that I'm testing, that Lou and I are testing out right now, or using a lot, or continuing to have more faith in as we go about our careers, honestly. And that's the big difference too, is we do this as a career, and it's not just this quest for self-discovery. It's no, we need and only use tools that are efficient and effective and do exactly what we want to do. And at the same time, we're not hyper comparing and analyzing as a hobbyist. Yeah. I think we just don't. We do that a little bit, but not to the extreme of someone that where every penny counts because this is a hobby. No, this is a career. Sometimes, honestly, I hate to say this, but as a career person, sometimes we just put money into it because that's what everybody else is using. And it's less thought out. Whereas a hobbyist, where it's every dollar that you spend into your hobby is a dollar that you're not spending into your career or into things that you need. So it's a little bit different. Mine's a business expense. For us, it's a business expense.
Yeah, more of that than anything on my end.
Yeah, so things that do consider that when you do consider our biases and stuff. But Lou, do you want to go first? What are some plugins that you're talking about?
All right, so there's one that I think you would agree has kind of been on a couple people's mind. I'm not gonna lie, I've been very bad on keeping up with anything related to, and this is not a stab at anybody, but in the Help Me Devon world or Colt Caparoon world, I understand that they have updates on updates on updates on the latest plugins and computers and whatever they're talking about, right? But lately I've found myself watching a lot of woodworking videos and just things outside of music, which I would agree with Colt Caparoon is actually very therapeutic. There is a video where he talks about his daily habits, and he's when I go on YouTube, I don't follow any music. He's it's part of my escape to go online, and I don't escape back to work, But there is a plugin that I have no idea if people are still talking about or not. But when it came out, I was very excited to see it, and I was very happy with the results at the same time that I was underwhelmed by the results. But I was happy enough to actually put it over one of the UA plugins we use, and that I know we both use, the Unfair Child 670. So I think this is the Eric Valentine plugin, right?
You've been using it too?
Yeah. So the Unfair Child is Undertone's take on the 670. And I don't know if it's fair to call it a take, because part of their claim is to be faithful and give a few more features. If I'm misunderstanding this is my bad, but Undertone Audio has like this $10,000 compressor called the Unfair Child, which is their 670, and they finally made a plugin
with
version
improvements.
Of it. With improvements. That's what they say. The plugin, I decided when I came back from tour, I'm like, I like this, and it's only $100, and I love a good deal when I see one. $100 for a plugin made by somebody who has a lot of weight behind their name, and because of that, I like to believe that Eric Valentine is the type of person who wants to respect the weight that's been put on his name by putting out a good product and not just a product. When I tried it out, I kid you not, I threw it on every single track of one of the live performances from Exhibit. And I was like, let me see. When I did the shows, I only had access to one compressor, and it was the stock compressor on the console. So if I can make it sound good with a stock console compressor on a digital board, this Undertone Audio 670 ought to sound great. And holy shit, I'm not going to lie, that thing was impressive. On kicks, on snares, on vocals, guitars, bass, keys, there was a way to use it on everything. And I like plugins that are very versatile. Now, granted, the 670 has always had this name of like, oh, it works well on everything. You gotta buy a real one. You just wouldn't believe the difference. But we also got Manny Marroquin, who owns one and doesn't use it because when he sends sessions back and forth between him and his assistant, he's like, well, it's kind of annoying to send it.
Are you talking about Manny Marroquin, or not Manny? You're talking about Tony Maserati.
Oh, it's Tony Maserati that does this? Yeah, so he has one, sends files to his assistant who doesn't have one, and then gets it back. And it's like, it can't sound different when he has it versus when I have it, because then we're making different decisions based on what gear we have. So having a plugin version that works really well on almost any source I threw it at it was really nice, because normally I would use the Legacy 670 from UA. But aside from that, like you would find that I use the El Rey a lot from what are they called? El Rey from Acoustica, which I've always liked it. And I'm starting to see this one as like a counterpart to the El Rey of like, it's that plugin that just has a nice sound. Like you can throw it on most things. Like I'll use the El Rey as a parallel compressor all the time. And now I'm starting to see myself use the Unfair Child as a parallel compressor all the time. So it's kind of in that bubble for me where I've always spoke really highly about the El Rey, and now I'm starting to see the 670 as one of my favorite plugins.
Yeah, I really, really do like both the El Rey and the Unfair Child 670. I've been using that quite consistently and often, like you said, across various different sources and stuff. I bought it when I did the trial, and I liked it so much that I bought it when it was $200.
Damn,
they came out with a release saying that I think we overcharged for the plugin, and they refunded me $100.
Hell
and
yeah!
They changed the price to $100. So I mean, that's how much I like it, is that I was willing to spend $200 on that plugin. Granted, I do have sincere and severe biases because the entire team, Eddie at Kive, who coded the plugin,
Kive is great.
Jesse, who connected Eddie and Eric Valentine through Mixland, is a good friend of mine. And I'm a fan of Eric Valentine. So I have a ton of biases already, but just from the trial, I also don't just get plugins willy-nilly.
I have too many to be doing that anymore.
Yeah, and I really genuinely think that one is really good. I use that one a lot. I didn't even have that on my list, so the fact that you brought it up is awesome.
Yeah.
And talking about that, the El Rey is interesting too. I put it in Plugin Doctor, which you can download the trial of for free, so you can actually plug in. Plugin Doctor is really cool. It's a software that you can test. It sends a signal, like a pulse, various different signals through your plugin, so you can actually see, and it analyzes the EQ curves, the compression curves, and the saturation.
If the saturation is causing compression or not.
Yeah, the saturation, and what harmonics are being emphasized. You can see all of that, even in just the free trial version. And it's cool to see what all these plugins are doing. So going back to that, Unfair Child, I think, is fantastic. And the fact that, according to Plugin Doctor, it's the only Fairchild. It's one of the only analog modeled compressors that are EQ-wise tonally linear. The only thing it has, it's totally flat from 20K to about 30 hertz, down to about 30 hertz. And then there's a high pass from around like 30, 40 hertz, if I'm not mistaken. That so it just rolls off. Otherwise, it is completely flat. And there are almost no analog modeled plugins that are like that. So any sort of emphasis that you hear is truly just saturation and that's just the saturation. So if you hear more mids, that is just the saturation. It is not anything else. And it's really cool because if you look into the coding of that, you also notice that the saturation and the compression curves, well, mostly the saturation is constantly modulating. So even if you have the same input and the same compression threshold and input levels, you'll notice that the harmonics are changing. Like they're shifting slowly, they're moving, and no other plugins really do that the same way. Very few other plugins do that the same way. And then on top of that, the natural harmonic order and emphasis of harmonics change based on not just the input levels, but also the threshold levels. So the amount of variances and modulation with the harmonics is very natural sounding. It is so incredibly good
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't play with that. I didn't mess around with that too much. Maybe that was a reason that I started liking it on so many different sources, but I didn't tie that as to a reason.
Yeah, going back to our conversations that we've had in the past with like the UAD's legacy version of the 670 versus the new version of the 670, and we've talked about how Leslie Brathwaite really loves the legacy version. Same thing, if you plug both of those plugins into Plugin Doctor, you'll see that there is a significant difference between the two, both in tonal change, so like EQ change, just by processing the plugin, so no saturation, just by tonal change, as well as saturation and harmonic emphasis, a second and third order harmonic emphasis. So they're totally different plugins. It's really interesting. But so yeah, that makes sense that why Leslie and others would prefer one over the other. Okay, yeah, so that's a really good one. I really, really like that one. And shout out to Eddie with Kive on that one. I've taken a break on it for a couple months, but a couple months ago I've built 3 plugins. I've coded 3 plugins and I've sent them to a ton of friends, and I created a forum to give feedback on the plugins, make sure that it's working on the system so I can debug them later and find out if they're useful or not, which one's most popular, so I can then invest in a UI designer and kind of get things. I haven't picked it up since. I've kind of just like dropped the ball on it. But now having some C++ and plugin development experience, I can further say how genius this plugin is that Eddie coded with Eric and Jesse. It's just fantastic. What a great, fantastic plugin. It's not as like El Rey is not very subtle. But this one is significantly more subtle, but I think it's also significantly more like real and adds that nuanced dimension. So don't expect like a huge change. Like it's a really subtle, very clean compression. I mean, it's a Fairchild. It's a feedback compressor. So it's like very high knee and very soft compression. So like be wary of that, but at the same time, like it's so smooth, it's so useful. Okay, cool. But I will admit it's $100, which is unfeasible for a lot of people, but it was great for us.
Yeah.
One that I've been using a lot that I love a lot recently, coming back to it, is one that I've discovered that my friend, so Gavin McMahon, recently did an episode with us that we released about a month or two ago about recording acoustic instruments. And he shared about 3 plugins, all from the same company, JD Factory.
Factory. Okay.
JD Factory, yeah, they're just simple interface plugins. And I downloaded the trial for them. They've got like room widener, pan box. They even got like a free one, Ultim utility. So I downloaded the room widener, which I think is fantastic. It's not a reverb. So here, let me read the description on this. Adds more front to back depth to your tracks and buses. Adds a sense of space to dry recordings without a tail. reestablishes a natural room feel to narrow recordings, breathe life into hard pan sounds. So it's recommended also, one of the ways that you can use it is to put it before the reverb.
Okay.
All it is just reflections. So it's not a reverb. It's basically a delay. It's just a delay of like first reflections. That's all it is. But how much it like adds a sense of space is really interesting. And then the free one that they have that I use quite a bit, the Altum utility, whatever, it's just the width and balance knob of their plugin, the pan box, which is incredible. But it's just the width and the balance, just the widening algorithms that they have for that, and the phase coherency while doing so is really good.
Okay. I do like that they keep that interface. I just looked up what it looks like, and I got to say that user interface is clean. It's super simple. It's not overhyped. And if it sounds good on top of that, I can't ask for anything else.
Yeah, there's a lot of like psychology behind user design, right? The UI, the user interface. And I found it interesting that when I saw how simple these interfaces was, just like Valhalla, my immediate instinct is, oh, this isn't like a business guy making plugins. These are nerds that like wanted extra utility. Work. Yeah. There's like, with super simple interfaces, there's like a bias that I have that's like, oh, these are like probably just like nerds making plugins. They're not like artists making plugins.
I've noticed that brands that do that are also more affordable, like Valhalla, where it's $50 per reverb, no matter which one you choose, or not per reverb, but per plugin. I saw that this one was 35 euros. So, you know, if we're still tracking at 10%, you know, that's roughly what, $40 for the plugin.
Yeah. So I really like those. I've never heard of that company before, and I've been using those quite a bit. It's fantastic. Alongside of those is in UAD, their native version, they have the Sound City Studios, which has, it's basically an impulse response of the Sound City Studios rooms. And then my favorite impulse response reverb is the Ocean Way one that they have, like the older one that they have.
With UA.
Yeah, I like for drums specifically, I literally cannot get enough of that one specifically. I've tried the Sound City Studio ones. I do like other like room things, whether they're digital or like other impulse responses, just the way that the Ocean Way sounds one with a little bit of manipulation, with the built-in manipulation. So like master EQ and like the different mic types. It is incredible. I think room reverbs are probably my favorite types of reverb to tweak. As much as I love and use like Valhalla or like I've also been using like, this is actually beyond sponsorship, but Baby Audio's Crystalline. Like it's got this like really cool sparkly synthesized.
It sounds like a delay on drugs.
Dude, it's like this like synthesized reverb. It's not natural at all, or it can be cranked to sound not natural at all. And it is, what is that called? Like in guitars when, not the sparkle, but when it's like,
pitch
no. In reverbs, there's, it's not
shimmer?
just shimmer. There's like this whole shimmer thing going on with the crystalline that like is real, like that super synthetic, almost like definitely synthesized reverb that is super cool that I love a lot. And I've been using that one a lot recently too. But in general, like I love room reverbs. Like even if you want a dry recording, room reverbs are great for that. Room reverbs can change the total dimension of the drums of any instrument really.
Yeah.
And so I think that room reverbs are almost more fundamental and important than like the longer, more fun reverbs that we hear all the time. And so that's just something that I've been using a lot. Those are the ones I've been using a lot. Like room reverbs, just going back to that. So fantastic.
Yeah. I think it's very undervalued because like, even as I'm building a mix for live, right? Like you're dealing with elements of like a big room, like mixing a record for headphones versus mixing a record for a giant room full of people. And reverb, spacing, and depth is such an important part on both ends to where like in live, you might opt to use no verbs or anything to really fight through the venue. And then you might choose to have like way shorter pre-delays than you would on like a recording because you already have a hall verb attached to it. So you might blend less of a hall and use more like plates or things that have that difference in the shimmer and all that kind of stuff that really stand out differently than the natural reverb of the hall you're in or the arena you're in. So it's like, I really like plugins that add that extra something that you don't typically hear, but helps it stand out. So like, especially for guitars, like you said, like the shimmer on guitar reverbs and things of that nature. If you're doing like, what do they call it? Like second rhythm when the lead guitarist does a different voicing of the same rhythm guitar's chords.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when you play like a higher voicing of that, you might opt for like a more shimmery reverb to really make that lead guitar stand out and play really nicely with each other. So the crystallizer from Soundtoys is definitely like really cool for that.
Baby Audio, crystallizer from Soundtoys. Oh yeah, where it adds that like, that's cool.
Yeah.
I thought you meant to say crystalline from Baby Audio, but you meant crystallizer from Soundtoys. That's a cool one too. That's a really cool one.
Yeah, it's really weird, but because like sometimes I'm not gonna lie, not always can I dial that fucker in. Like, that guy can be really weird real quick. But they do have Valhalla Shimmer, which is really nice for those things as well.
Yeah. I think those like really fake synthetic reverbs are just as cool as like the impulse response realistic reverbs and stuff.
I still want to one day have the Mercury Maris 7, I think it's called, or Maris Mercury 7. That's what it is. Maris is the brand. Mercury 7 is the reverb pedal that they make. And now they made the Mercury X. But basically like that's one where like you can choose like reverbs that pitch upward over time, pitch downward over time. You can do simultaneous, where like they spread apart and everything, and it sounds wild. I've always found like creative reverbs to be like my favorite ones to use because at the end of the day, it just keeps the track with like a little bit of ear candy that you're not pushing to the forefront, but it's not a static reverb anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next category, before we go on to the next category, a quick shout out to our sponsor, us, Mixing Music Podcast. You want more content? You want more technical content of how to use different tools and what techniques are being used? Come join us on the exclusive episodes. That's mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive to join me and James on a journey to continually inform everyone about more technical tips and knowledge as we break them down or as we hear other experts talk on different tips, techniques, and mindsets. So actually less mindsets unless it's mindsets on how to use a compressor specifically. So they're very technical based. And not only do you get 2 new episodes every single week, but you unlock more than 200 episodes of previously past episodes. If you're on Spotify natively, you'll see that all of the exclusive episodes are locked and you can see what you're missing out on. But if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you subscribe on Spotify, then they will email you a link of a custom RSS feed, which then you can use to import the exclusive episodes into Apple Podcasts. So you don't have to switch platforms if you don't want to. The payments are just accepted by Spotify. That's all it is. And regardless of whether or not you like those episodes or you listen to those episodes, it's a really simple way to support us financially if you like to. So it's basically our Patreon. Except the way that we deliver the content is fixed. So, that's all it is. It's really great. I think they're fantastic. And we're going to have James more on the regular podcast as well. So go check that out. Once again, that's mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive. Okay. So the third thing that I want to talk about is actually, I've always loved clipping and saturation. Those are probably like my favorite genre of plugins. And it's the reason why I pick the compressors that I do and sometimes even the EQs that I do. And so the one that I want to talk about next is, first off, huge shout out to Standard Clip. I know that we have Orange Clip and Gold Clip now from Schwab Digital, which are fantastic. But also the $25 Standard Clip from Sir Audio, it's like $25. I'm using that always, constantly, a ton. It's fantastic. It's great. You should have that. Always have that. And then if you can afford it, the other flavors. If you're a part of Plugin Alliance, then the BX Clipper is it's fine. It's good. It's actually I use it sometimes. It's another flavor for sure. Gold clip is great. Orange clip is phenomenal. But yeah, standard clip is just, you got to have that. Number 2 is I want to talk about tape plugins, and there's a couple that have been standing out to me recently as of late. The Mix Head from Metric Halo and who's that? Make Believe Studios.
Yep.
Yeah. On the back end, when you run it through
SPL, right?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. Their big marketing thing is like it's one of the few pieces of outboard gear that Serban Ganea has been known to use, and he's even got a preset that he built on that plugin. It's cool. I bought it. I bought that one too. I really like that one because it's significantly more transparent than any other tape plugin that I've bought. So it's another one of those, just like the Aaron Fairchild, where if you put it in through Plugin Doctor, it is tonally completely linear. Whereas almost every other tape modeling plugin is not linear. They have like if you use different tape, what is it called? Like if you change the tape or the tape heads or the different machines, then they change tonal balance, changes quite a bit. But the mix head doesn't change the tonal balance at all. It's just saturation again, which ends up into compression as well. And I really like the flavor of that one. It's significantly more subtle than you'd think. It doesn't change a lot, but I'm not paying more money for a plugin that my value in a plugin is not based on how much it can change the sound.
Yeah.
My value of a plugin is how quickly I can dial it in and how good it sounds. And that's another one where it doesn't change the sound a ton. In fact, that was one of its major criticism, is that like it's significantly more transparent than you think it is, and it doesn't change that much. It's doing very little, but I really like the little that it does, and I think that's fair to say. And I've been using that one a lot, and this is too new. This is too new for me to share and totally back up. But I've been using Jesse's Mixland's new plugin, the 3348 tape machine.
Mm-hmm.
That one sounds fantastic as well. It sounds incredible.
I was wondering about that one because I think I've mentioned it before. Like as far as like tape goes for me, it's always been the Studer, the OTR, or the Oxide, because they're 3 completely different tones. But the OTR is ATR, not OTR. The ATR has always like kind of been like a master bus kind of thing. The Studer's always been kind of like a subgroup bus kind of thing for me. The Oxide has always been like a low ND kind of support kind of thing, maybe in parallel or something of that nature. But when I saw the flexibility in what you can do with the Mixland tape machine plugin, it got me really, really curious. Like I've just been busy with other things to try out a new plugin. Just wasn't in the books yet for me right now. But I'm really glad to hear that it's actually coming out good. Because when I saw that you can change what converters are being used and everything, I was like, ooh. So it's not just a one and done and dial in your tone. This seems almost not infinitely variable, but you know, if we're going to square up the numbers, like this looks like you can come out with hundreds of different ways of using this.
Yeah. I want to say this carefully, but when it comes to tape machine emulations, I actually do recommend emulation. So not like tape-based saturation, but like emulation of different modeling of different tape machines. Mm-hmm. I do actually, more of me recommends using Plugin Doctor to figure out exactly what they're doing. Now, the reason why, the part of me that doesn't want to recommend that is because I think once you see what it is doing, then I think that can bias and color the lens that you look through. That being said, I think it's important to know exactly what it's doing with tape machines, because some of these EQ and tonal changes are pretty drastic.
Yeah.
And then also but then again, this is the interesting thing with any sort of tape machine, just because it's got a built-in linear like tonal change in it, like the EQ is different, right? Mm-hmm. The saturation alongside the compression curves, the compression of it itself will also change the tone. So just because it's not linear doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you just need to hear and listen for those as you're using them. And I think that that's actually really important, because some of these EQ curves are pretty extreme. And with the saturation that you get from the tape, it's not always obvious where those dips and boosts are specifically. So go ahead and look at those. And the 3.348 is really great. They've got a couple. Not only does it have like the EQ built into it, but you could change the bias, which is pretty normal. Which is basically just like for most of the presets is based off of just around 200 hertz. You can have more or less 200 hertz. That's all the bias does. And there's like emphasis as well. And then you could drive it and it doesn't tell you exactly how much gain reduction you're doing or exactly when it starts clipping. So it's like a little bit ambiguous, but in a really good way that makes you use your ears. And again, with any of this stuff, what I want is peak meters to be the same, but VU to go up. So I want my meters, which I always leave on like peak on Pro Tools. I always leave my metering to peak or whatever, so I can see
Pro Tools Classic.
Not Pro Tools Classic. I think it's like peak. So I'm looking at the peaks, the sample peaks, and so you can really see when something is being clipped through the meter, or like when the threshold is of like how much it's actually gain reduction is doing on the transient. Where a VU is more like the power, so it's the average, right? So when I see with the saturation tape clipping, whatever, I want the meter to go down or I want the meter to be exactly the same, but the perceived volume to go up. Right. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I think that those tape machines do a really good job. The clippers that I mentioned as well do a really good job, and they all have different flavors. Yeah, that's it for me, dude, on the tape. And then, dude, I've also, on that note, like oftentimes I've been using the Unfair Child as a saturator, just not even using the compression circuit at all.
Yeah, because you could just bypass it and drive it, can't you?
Yeah. Which, there's I don't want to really spend too much time about it, but I have an outboard piece of gear that's emulating. It's like a modern take on the UA 175B, which is the Verimute tube version precursor to the 1176. And this specific one, you can turn off the compression circuit and it's just going through the tube drive circuits. And with this compressor specifically, even just doing that, because it does compress. It does compress, but just
ever so slightly.
Yeah, and it's the saturation, and it just thickens everything up. And there's something about saturation and having more volume. Yeah, I really, really like that. I think it creates a significant amounts of sensation of density, aggression, and fullness. It's like hair that like it just gets more and more dense and full. I don't know. There's something that was a really bad metaphor, but
we're getting more and more froed, but it's a short fro.
Yeah.
No, I think honestly, like on my end, as far as like EQs go, like if we were to ship categories, I've kind of gone back to one, but stayed true to another. So the one I've stayed true to is the Harrison 32. I think I talked about this last time, where I like the smoothness of it. And the Harrison 32C is basically the EQ from the Harrison 32C console, or Harrison 32 console. I could be wrong on the naming, but the fucking console EQ was so damn good on that thing. And it's one of the ones that I actually learned on when I was, I want to say this was like 2010.
And are you using this? Are you using this, the UAD version, or are you using their Harrison Audio's native, like their plugin?
Not through Harrison Mixbus, but the UA version.
They also have their standalone Harrison 32
they made
channel strip plugin.
Okay, so I'll be honest.
So you're not talking about that.
I didn't know that they'd made a standalone.
Yeah, they have a bunch of standalones actually.
That's news to me.
Yeah, but very good job with their marketing team. But yeah, you're talking about the UAD version.
Yeah. But I mean, it's worthwhile looking at it now. But that EQ has always been something that was kind of magical in the top end. It's very smooth and musical in the mid range. The low end, when you decide to boost or cut it, like you don't want to go too much with it because it becomes very pronounced, but it's very smooth and open in the way that EQ works. And I've always really appreciated of it because similar to how I know you're familiar with the MDW 5 EQ or EQ5, whatever it's called.
That's the George Massenburg digital
exactly.
EQ. Yep.
Yeah, and we both know like boosting the top end on that thing is really smooth. It's nice. Doing cuts, precision cuts with it is actually very useful. And in that case, you have just like the Harrison 5 bands. Now with the Harrison, you can't really get that narrow with it and you can't get that precise with it because you don't have like a screen to monitor what you're doing with and you don't get exact frequency readouts, which forces you to use your ear, which for the same reason I love Voice of God, just use your damn ears, you know? But the Harrison is just so smooth that you can throw it on almost anything, boost what you want to boost, and it just keeps it very, very open and not like it just doesn't feel like you boost the frequency. It's like you boost the frequency plus everything around it, even if you didn't really intend to, and it just sounds natural. It doesn't sound like an artificial boost. Aside from that, the one that I've kind of gone back to using is the API 560, which is the opposite. It's kind of like an aggressive EQ. It's fixed points. So you know what frequency range you're affecting. Like you have 5K, 1K, or not 5K, 500 hertz, 1K, and things of that nature. But when you boost like the top end on it, like even the slightest touch is super audible. So it's really good for like instruments like guitars or synthesizers where you're just trying to like kind of smooth it out by doing like a pretty notable cut in a range that it has. But I've been using it a lot more on vocals to do like taming of around like 250 to 500 hertz. And I've been really liking it for boosting that 1K. It's literally the one slider right in the middle. They usually color it red. I don't know if the UA one colors it red, but I've been using the Waves one. And this plugin's been around for what? 20 years? Like, it's an old plugin. We're not talking about anything new. And we're also not talking about like the highest fidelity, at least as far as I can tell. But it does something cool being so obvious. It's one of those plugins where it's like, I know you're active. As soon as you turn it on and touch one boost or cut, like it's very audible. So I'm doing the whole like hold command and do micro nudges with it. But it's really, really useful for like deharshing or adding bite to something. You know, if you want to take something away, it will take it away. If you want to add something to stand out, that EQ is oddly good for that. And it just kind of was one of those where I had a vocal where like between 1.5 to 4K, it just felt a little sunken in. I don't know why. It just felt sunken in and I had a hard time like getting it to cut through. I added some saturation and the saturation was just making it a little distorted in a way that I just didn't find pleasing. I threw this plugin on and it adds this sense of bite. It's almost like I hate to say it, but it's like teething with your lips spread apart, which sounds so bad. But it literally feels like you're biting into something and you can feel that bite when you push it. Yeah, it's gritty in a clean way. I don't know what it is, but I just like it. And it really helped something that felt like it wasn't going to cut through without like massive amounts of boost or anything to not really need that much to cut through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so well, let's I think that's kind of it for this episode. As far as EQ goes, I don't think I have any new EQ plugins that I'm using or things that I'm like really pushing for these days. EQ for me is more of a
no, you use Kershaw more now, don't you?
Nope, I use Purrp Q3 more. There was a time that I was using Kershaw more.
Is there a reason you went back to Q3?
Yeah, Q3, I love the flexibility of Kershaw, but it's a little bit too flexible that I lose too much efficiency. So gotcha. So it's like
too many
the
options.
The fact that you can control the attack and release of the dynamic bands. It's like where the Pro Q3 does it automatically.
Mhm.
In the end, if I took the time for it, the Kirchhoff one is superior. But
If we're
the
talking
only reason
dollars
why
per
I was
hour,
I don't care that much for it. And then the only reason why there are times that I use it because I specifically do need that flexibility.
yeah,
But most importantly, I was using the Kirchhoff because I did like a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure anime backdrop on it, or like an Evangelion anime backdrop on it, and you can customize the user interface. So that's why I was using it. This is the weeb side of me.
it's kind of funny because I don't know if you ever saw it or not watched it, but just saw the title of it. I made a video about this plugin makes me money, and it was the FabFilter Pro Q3. And I actually had a couple people. I'm not going to say there was a ton of comments. There wasn't a ton of comments. My videos don't get comments. What are comments? But there was somebody who did comment saying like, oh, the Kirchhoff EQ is significantly superior. I don't see how this one could really make you money. And my response to it was efficiency. That's all it comes down to. Like the fact that I can load up Pro Q3 and know what I'm doing very quickly and attack what I need to attack. That's what makes me money. There's going to be a million new plugins, and I'm sure there's going to be one that's better than the Kirchhoff that comes out soon enough. But I think it's kind of cool to hear you say, like, at a certain point, like all these features were making me lose efficiency. And not cool to say because I want to see Kirchhoff not doing as well. I want to see Kirchhoff thrive and stuff. But I think it's cool to acknowledge when something is so flexible that it gets in your way.
Yeah, that's the thing too with a lot of these plugins is oftentimes I get them because they're easy.
Yeah.
Or they make one specific process easy.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. Anyway,
which is why I'm curious on the other one. What was it called? The JD Factory. I'm curious about them.
Yeah, that one was really interesting, especially because the pan box has a lot of different options.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of thought. Go back to the episode with Gavin McMahon if you haven't listened to that one already, that he explains why, like this different ways of processing panning. Because it's just in reality, the way that it is right now is, hold on, let me look up JD Factory. So yeah, typically panning is literally just turning down the volume of one side. Well, then there's like tonal pan, which it'll like change the frequencies based on location, which is more real life, or like smart pan, which does something else. And then there's like Haas pan. So it's like, there's a few different ways of pan. Okay, hold on. So it says tonal pan offers a more natural pan. Unlike traditional panning methods that simply adjust the levels of the left and right channels, tonal panel uses filters that pan high frequencies before low frequencies. This results in a more lifelike and organic sound. Smart pan borrows from some of the logic from tonal pan, but goes further by including mid-side processing to the equation, resulting in an even more realistic stereo field in most situations. Haas pan achieves the Haas effect with a simple delay. Simple knob. Delay one side of the stereo signal by a set amount of milliseconds. When the fine mode is activated, available range narrows from, allowing for micro delay adjustments. And then balance is a yet effective balance panner that adjusts the levels of each channel based on the panning direction. In stereo pan mode, the content of the opposing channel gradually blends into the channel that you are panning towards, allowing for panning without any loss of information. Yeah, so like you can actually pan, so it actually moves the left side information to the right side rather than just turning down the volume of the left side.
Yeah.
So it's really, really good. And all of these are mono compatible. So it's just super simple plugin that, again, for the hyper nerds out there. Anyway, so I think we've gone over time and with this episode, and we've talked a lot about them. I'm really excited for the technological advances. There's only one commentary that is a little bit of a tangent that I want to say is, I hope I'm observing if the oversaturation of the plugin market is finally taking place and people are starting to realize that there's not as much money, the cash grab that the plugin market originally had from so few competitors is no longer there, and it's so much more saturated and competitive, and so many options that there is some fatigue setting in from both the consumer as well as the producer. And I think I'm observing, I'm hoping, I'm wondering if there is that line that we're starting to cross.
I think that this is going to be a reality, if not already is. But I think it's still something that people need to venture in, because without those that venture into it, even against that grain, when are we going to see anything cool come out at that point? If it's just like, well, it's just not going to make it through, then it's the same logic as oversaturation of music on Spotify with 60,000 new releases every day. How's your song supposed to cut through? And it just comes down to people resonating with your song. In the plugin world, it's finding out what's missing.
Yeah.
What exactly do we need? Because with shout out to Jesse on this one. I fucking love how goofy his ad for his tape plugin is, because it's like, what? You mean to tell me that this is the tape machine used on all these hit records for so many decades, and nobody's made a plugin about it? And then made a song about the plugin, and actually made it kind of catchy, but also made it kind of goofy. And like, that marketing strategy is just really going to stand out the same way that, you lint liquor was a great, memorable line for, what was the gum company? For fresh, clean mouth, no matter what. I forgot what that company was, but point is, like, we are seeing a huge saturation, and that's why it's harder for people like me who love to play with new toys all the time to want to play with new toys all the time, because at a certain point, you get to a stage where, like, the plugins I have work fine, so every time there's a new one releasing, it's just a new one of the same thing I already have. So at a certain point, you're either filling a void, which is kind of the end game for any product developer in any industry, or you find a way to get it in front of people, which I think this is where content creator plugins really kind of thrive. There's that one plugin that, Help Me Devon, I think he does templates and sample packs. I think that's his bag. How many templates do you need? How many templates does one artist need? If you got 20 different templates to choose from, outside of a few plugin changes, that's all that's really happening. If you're recording yourself, I guess that makes sense. But if you got 20 different 670s, then I think the same thing that happened with your Kirchhoff experience, going back to Pro Q3, I think it just becomes like, wow, how many 670s do we need? How many different variables do we need in our flexibility of the CQ? How many different templates do we need? But if you're a content creator, I think, creating plugins is what's kind of saturating the market, because maybe it's not the greatest plugin, but it's a good money grab as a content creator, if you're creating templates or whatever. But I think quality will still stand out the same way that quality mixers will stand out above AI. Quality mastering will stand out above AI. It just comes down to filling a void. People want quick and easy. People want cheap and affordable. Then that's going to be out there. If people want quality and a little more detail to the work being done, that's still going to be out there. So I'm definitely interested to see what happens, because I feel like we're at a stage where Spotify made it possible to saturate music more than ever before, and yet we still have standouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a whole nother conversation that we've dived into and can dive into again and again. You and I still are very hopeful of AI, and I think that,
man, when they put AI into live sound, I'm gonna be excited. You mean to tell me your bitch ass is gonna do all the ringing out of my monitors for me? Hell yes. Save me some goddamn time. Let me focus on the major part of my job. I invite that shit.
And more importantly, I have the faith in humanity that we will figure out what regulations are needed and necessary.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that we will be able to figure out what's best for humankind, and I don't think humans will allow AI to overrun us completely. Nope. Even if it is more financially better too. Just at the end of the day, I think I believe people will make the right choice. I think not always is the majority correct. But I do think that in general, and by the way, I'm just realizing now, this is not any sort of necessary, this is not intended to be a commentary on any sort of political election that we just had right now, recently.
No,
so don't interpret what I'm saying as that. So I don't think the political majority is always correct, but I think there's valuable information. Hold on. I just said it.
You just said it. I was like, wait a minute.
I was confused. I was double thinking. Politics aside, I don't think that in every case, majority is correct. I think the majority can be incorrect, but I think there's something to learn. So I think that in general, I have the faith that the majority will fight back against AI in the right way. And there will be pushback, and we won't get bowled over by the few parasitic, greedy people that will want to use it aggressively and parasitically. I think that we have I have the faith that we will push back against it. And I'm really excited for where we land with this and how we will continue to use this. I'm really excited about it. And to my point, putting my money where my mouth is, if it goes so far to push me out of my job, I'm not allowed to be a mixer ever. I really love mixing, and it would make me sad. Genuinely, it would make me sad for a time. But I feel no shame and I feel no regret of facing what would have been considered the inevitable if it got to that point, and shifting my career.
Yeah.
Pivoting my career. I have no qualms against it. I'm not gonna die over having to pivot. Because if it even gets to that point, again, it's inevitable anyway if it gets to that point. So it's more personal, my personal decision to either accept it or to not. I think there's going to be enough pushback, and we'll figure out what more pragmatic situation is. It's kind of like this is a lame comparison that is so morally incorrect to talk about, but I think it's a funny comparison, or I think potentially. I wonder if there's something to learn from this. Let me say it out loud. I'm developing this thought in real time, so this may sound really dumb. In Red Dead Redemption 2, there's a mission.
That's racist.
Yeah, there you go. In Red Dead Redemption 2, which I just finished playing for the first time, there's a mission where you help an old guy, a has-been, who had his house, who lost his job, and you have to go collect his things in his house, and then you go collect his things and you go give it back to him. While you're collecting his things in his house and helping this guy that lost his job because the economy changed and his job is no longer available, you find out that he was a slaver. And then the empathy that you built up during the storyline, it's like, oh no, this guy lost his job. It's so bad. Now, obviously being a slave or a slave trader is horrendously immoral. And I think that as far as morality goes, there's no comparison to what I just said. But I wonder if I do think, and he was just like, I was doing this for honor. Like, I really loved my job. I was good at my job, and people just kicked me out because they no longer needed me. And so from his perspective, he was really sad. Now, obviously, morality-wise, it was just black and white. And actually, if you end up murdering him, your honor goes up. So even the game morality is like, they give you kudos for killing him. But I just did find it interesting that, even as something so extreme like that, it will be on an individual level super difficult to accept that things change, the world changes, and the needs change. And even if that, especially if that directs you. But in this case, the change was objectively good. We don't know if the change with AI will be objectively good or not. So this is the big flaw with with the comparison that I'm making here. But I find the inevitable fear of change and feeling disgraced for no longer being needed in one specific way is a natural human thing. And I think that that's something that we need to work on a personal level to get over, rather than we creating the false narrative that it is objectively true or objectively bad. And because I don't know if that will be, no matter. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is and saying that yes, it would be painful for me, but I would have no issue pivoting if we need to. But I don't think that'll happen.
There's a lot of I'll say it like this. You would be surprised the amount of specialty fields in our trade, which is audio. We'll just say in general audio, live audio, studio audio, whatever you want to call it, right? But for instance, one of the people that I would want to see some level of AI to kind of be implemented in, but I also know that there's so much that goes into it that I don't see it in the near future, is system tuning for venues. And this could also apply to actual studios because we're dealing with so many different variables that one of the parts that it could probably help with is a common practice is the provider for the line arrays is supposed to test every single box, do a scan readout and everything to make sure that they're not sending out faulty units, blowing woofers, drivers that are gone bad, anything, whatever, speakers that are not actually lining up to spec. And because of that, it could throw the system out of whack. It would be cool to see AI kind of take over that specific part of the role so that when the system arrives to the venue, there's a quicker process to actually scan and test everything and make sure everything's to spec so that the venue can then move on with their day. Because AI, I feel like, would actually benefit some fields more than others in the world idea of it being a supportive tool versus replacing your job. You know, first it has to learn to support your role versus before it can actually take your role. That's like saying the intern is going to suddenly do the job of the studio owner. You know, it doesn't really work like that. It first has to learn the intern's roles and everything else and all the other processes before it can actually take over your role. Now, with that said, there's very smart people working on these things and they're spending years on it already, you know, so there's been a lot of development in place. But, you know, there's that company, what is it? It's the mastering company where they use robotics and AI to kind of do all the automations that people program online. They say they want a little more of this on the back EQ, and then it actually goes, reaches for the back EQ, turns it up, and then you can listen to your master in real time and make changes. Like, there's technology that's out there already that offers all these things so that you can make these decisions yourself. But yet there's still tons of mastering engineers finding work that are working completely in the box, you know? So even with all the technology and all the gear and all the intelligence behind it, you're still going to see work available. But at that point, it's on us to really continue to raise the bar in what we offer, whether that be quality, service, communication, or anything, before it's a real issue. But I'm going to be honest, I'm pro AI. I want my job to be a little bit faster and more efficient. I'm not here saying that I want people to lose their job, but I don't see why you would consider losing your job before you're considering that it could support your job. You know, raise that $1 per hour if it can.
Well, I do think, and this is where I think that this is when it comes to personal judgment and personal empowerment. I think that everybody is on a different philosophical journey and path, and some people are stunted and believe in different things, and some people are really intelligent and believe in the same things as the dumb people. They've come full circle after going through levels of cynicism. This is the last thought. I need to pee, so I want to get going. But this is the last thought this week that, for example, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This week, I've discovered and am starting to learn about the stages of faith development. Stages of faith development by James Fowler. Hold on, I want to say, James Fowler. And he basically talks to a bunch of people of Christian, Islamic, Jewish, and atheist faith, and he determines and he classifies different stages of faith people naturally go to, not through literal believing in God, like faith in the traditional sense, but morality and how we see others and the world in general. So like a more generalized anthropologic understanding of faith rather than a theological understanding of faith. And so there's different stages, like stage 0, which is the first stage, is like typically found in 0 to 2-year-olds. It's like it's just trust or mistrust. There's nothing beyond that. The first stage, stage 2, which is called stage 1, is like 3 to 7-year-olds. It's when you start to see imagination and fantasy, where they pick up on images, stories, and ideas. And then stage 2, which is number 3, is the mythic literal faith. So it's like these different stages where like all of a sudden then it turns into people taking things literally. And then after that, the synthetic conventional stage, is people start to, which is usually adolescence to adulthood, people start to integrate their faith with a broader understanding of society and relationships. So they're starting to integrate their perspectives that they were taught into their own personal lives and how they kind of develop. From young adulthood and beyond, stage 4, which is number 5. Anyway, so I could keep going, but eventually the natural order of things is eventually there's like an acceptance of everything wrong and negative about the faith that you've been taught up to believe. Mm-hmm. And so there's this, and this is the part that is a little bit unfortunately frustrating to me, which is why I'm not quite at the final level yet. So the 5th level is starting to understand the cynicism of it all. Like, this is wrong, this is bad. And it's a high developed level. Yeah. But there is 2 levels above that still. So, and I think the thing that I found super interesting is, one, is that my experience into cynicism and my experience, and this goes beyond faith. I think there's a lot of commonalities beyond with perception of life in general. I think you can easily use this model to kind of determine how you feel about the patriarchy, for example. And I do think that there's going along with faith. So there's this level of cynicism, which is a high level. Most people don't even get to this level. A lot of adults stick with the inability to see beyond the literal, which is usually developed in adolescence. They think it's literal, everything is literal, there's no changing around it. Then people start like getting open minds, like, oh, okay, actually everybody has different truths based on where they are, region-based kind of things. And then there's like, oh, wait, this is actually starting to be wrong because... So it's like the next level beyond accepting that everything else is like places are different, people have different opportunities. Then just like, okay, actually kind of trying to determine what morality is wrong. And that's an actually really advanced level. That's the point that I'm making. And the problem with this, and this is just human understanding, is that we assume that people have not thought as deeply about these things as we have ourselves, especially for those that are hyper intelligent and self-aware. We just assume that people have not gone through these processes and are stuck at these lower levels. And thus they are not able to see the cynical, this is wrong, Christianity is wrong, whatever. And they're unable to find fault beyond themselves. The next level past that, and this is something that you should determine yourself. It's not for me to tell you. But the point is so I don't want to kind of like presuppose, because it's going to make it sound like I'm calling anybody that hasn't gone beyond that dumb, and that's not my point. But there are 2 levels beyond that, something that you should research and something that you should look into and find hope in. And the main thing, the number 7 is kind of, it says universalizing faith. This is very rare. The 2 examples that he gives in his book is Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., which is basically saying, the argument of God, does he exist or does he not? And it's understanding that that is a dumb question, and it doesn't, not, that is a dumb question is a bad way of perceiving it, is that does not matter. What really matters is serving others. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, it's this full circle. So it's like, you notice how those that are stuck in different levels perceive that anybody that has come back to, oh, faith can be good, can be perceived as dumb by those who are still stuck in the cynical stage. Yeah. Doesn't make sense? So it's like and then those that are past the cynical stage, so it's like, it's this weird thing where everything kind of comes back full circle. So the only thing that is incorrect is to assume that everybody else is dumb for thinking one way. Because after time through, that's like the point of what I'm trying to say. So with AI and everything else, I think it's totally fine and rational and normal to get to the point of like, you're scared of change and you're very fearful of what to happen. But you also can't assume that people haven't thought about it and have chosen to pick optimism willy-nilly. No, like to think that Lu and I have chosen to become optimistic about AI isn't because we are naive or unlearned, which it could be. It could totally be that. Who's to determine what stages I am? That also includes anybody that is pessimistic about AI. Who is to determine what stage Lu and I are at? And I think that's the full 360 moment. That's stage 6, is recognizing our false narratives that we create amongst ourselves. And the reason why this resonated with me is, and one of the major criticisms with this is that, as far as like faith-based models go, is that, for example, in the Far East, they're very anti-existentialism. So even level 2 believers, that nobody would ever actually enter into this level stage because everybody, for example, in Japan and China, like don't care about whether God exists or not. That's like a non-important thing. Buddha is very anti-existentialist. Wondering where you came from is a waste of time, and it's part of the reason why we suffer. And so like that blends into culture, so it just doesn't fit. It doesn't generally fit across the world in different cultures. But I think that there's a lot of, it's just very interesting. This is where my mind is going. And I think this is why there's frustrations everywhere is the false narratives that we create with ourselves, assuming that people haven't thought as deeply as we have, and assuming that people are not cynical because they haven't thought about it or they're ignorant. Where I think there's a level past cynicism, a level that is quiet, because those that get past cynicism also have a significant less need to be validated for their feelings and don't feel a need to speak their thoughts or to be understood. That there's a level beyond that. So it's this it's this weird, interesting concept that I've been thinking about this week related to AI. Sorry, dude. I don't think that deserves its own episode, but that's something that I've been thinking about deeply right now.
Yeah. Which I can tell from the question in Instagram.
Yeah. For people that don't know, I just put in the, what is it called? I don't even know what it's called.
Yeah,
not the story,
thought bubble.
But the thought bubble. I said, like, why do we assume people have thought about things less than we have? And this is a personal frustration of mine too. Anyway, and a cool thing that's very similar is that the 7th level is very similar to the Buddhist idea of enlightenment as well, which is letting go of the need of validation, letting go of everything and coming back that the entire point of everything is to serve others. And full moral validation and validation for existence comes down to serving others. Regardless, whatever. And for example, like Martin Luther King was famously, and this is one of the things with the books, is that the author James Fowler didn't know Martin Luther King personally, but so this is more based on perception. This is another great critique of the book, valid critique of the book. But he said in general, like from his perception, like Martin Luther King and his teachings relative to like Malcolm X is across the board beyond race at the time. Universal truths. He would fight for a lot of the things that would go on today, and his speeches and his ideologies were universal and significantly meant to help others beyond what was needed then. And it's the and I'm not trying to minimize Malcolm X's philosophies and thoughts there, but they are different, and I think that alone is something worth thinking about. I don't believe it's healthy or appropriate to say that one is superior to the other, and I would say that it is unhealthy to decide which one is superior to the other. It dishonors the idea of both. And I think, anyway, I'm done talking. This could go on forever. So on that note, as you have an existential crisis and wonder how the heck everybody's going to survive. Yeah, dude, on that note, happy mixing, my friends, and stay saucy.